Hi everyone, my name is Sally Fowler. I'm the owner and trainer for Disabled Advantage. Thank you for joining me on my Patreon tier, Service Dog Questions Answered. In today's question, I will be answering what's best for training a service dog, purebred or a mutt, rescue or a breeder, puppy or an older dog. First of all, this topic is arguably the first question that most people want to know when they start thinking about training their own service dog, or when they start looking for a service dog trainer who provides already trained dogs. Is should I pick a trainer who works with mutts? Should I pick a trainer who works with dogs from a breeder? What's best for me to start with? And I don't know. And I know that seems unhelpful. You signed up for my Patreon tier to get answers. And if you decide to come train with me, you're going to want answers and you're going to want direction. And if you come to me, I will absolutely help you. But when we're talking about what's best for training a service dog, unfortunately, there isn't a cut and dry, easy, guaranteed recipe of ingredients for creating a service dog. And it would be great if there was, because then it would be a lot easier to train service dogs. But when you're working on training a service dog, there's a lot of different variables or ingredients at play. And how you combine them directly relates to what the result is. And sometimes you can combine everything perfectly and have a perfect mix of ingredients, and the dog just doesn't want to be a service dog or doesn't have what it takes to be a service dog. So there is no perfect recipe here. So when you are trying to make a cake, you have a certain list of ingredients, and you also have a certain list of instructions that goes with that recipe, with those ingredients. And if you deviate from an ingredient, or you deviate from an instruction, it may not seem like it's a big deviation, but it can affect the outcome of your cake. And it may not mean that your cake is inedible. It may not mean that your cake is disgusting. It may not mean that your cake is the bestest cake ever, but it might still be a good enough cake. And when it comes to making cakes, a lot of it does come down to the human element, which is, I have made a few cakes. All my cakes seem to come out really dense. There was definitely one cake where I put in too much butter. Great cake. Super unhealthy. But the human element there is that I'm not a baker. Cakes are not my specialty. And I have a disability, so I like taking shortcuts. And baking doesn't really like for you to take shortcuts. Because weird things do happen to your end result. But if a professional baker were to make the exact same cake, their cake would be awesome, because it's what they're good at. It's what they specialize in. They take the ingredients very seriously. They pick the best possible ingredients, and their cake is gonna be way better than mine. But they do still have the possibility of making mistakes, where they pick the best ingredients, but something's off and this batch just doesn't turn out quite right. And that's going to happen. When you're looking for a dog to start out training a service dog, whether you're a program, whether you're a private trainer, whether you're an owner trainer, you're kind of making a cake. You're trying to put together a composition of ingredients and instructions to create a good service dog. And your service dog end product might come out awesome. It might come out good enough, or it might come out as, yeah, this really can't be a service dog. Either the dog doesn't want to be a service dog, they can't learn the tasks, they are too small for what you intended the dog to do. They're not good at working with other people. They bonded with the trainer and now can't work with the handler. All sorts of end results are possible as to why service dogs fail from training. But a lot of ingredients go into making a good service dog. But there is no one best recipe. So we can all agree that there are a ton of cake recipes, which is wonderful and terrible, because cakes are delicious, but, not healthy. But I deviate. There are a bunch of cake recipes, and some of them are better than others. And who makes them depends also on how well they turn out. Also, the day and the time and the weather. Okay, so a lot of things go into it, and anything can take this off course, is what I'm trying to get at. There are a lot of different recipes for making a good service dog. There is no one cake recipe. There is no one service dog recipe. That's what I want to be very clear on. There is no best for training a service dog. And there are some trainers who would definitely disagree with me. And I'm going to go into that. But my wholehearted belief is that when we're looking at a dog for you to own or train as a service dog, for yourself or for a loved one, what we need to look at is what's going to be best for you or your loved one. I'll simplify this. Let's say we're training a dog for you. What matters the most is what's best for you. And this is something that I'm going to harp on a lot more than most other trainers. A lot of service dog trainers care mostly about public access and task training and handler rights. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important. They absolutely are very important to training a service dog. But when I look at helping a client train a service dog, especially if they're coming to me and they're asking for help finding a dog, what I'm looking at is your needs, long-term picture of what kind of dog you need for your disability and your limitations and your lifestyle, keeping it all in realistic check. Also keeping in mind things like your budget and your lifestyle and your hobbies and what you want to get back into doing. And the end picture of what your team is going to look like one day. I'm not just focused on the service dog. I'm focused on you and the service dog working together as a team. And that starts by picking the right dog for you. I'm going to say that again. That starts by picking the right dog for you. And the right dog for you may not be the same recipe that somebody else followed. And the reason is that we're all different. We all have a different starting point. We all have different disabilities. And even if we have the exact same disability, if you have CRPS also, if you have full body CRPS, the same way I have full body CRPS, your symptoms might be different than mine. The ones that I have on a daily basis that I need the most help managing from a service dog might be completely different from the ones that affect you the most and that where you need the most help from a service dog. It might be similar. There's definitely going to be some crossover, but it may not look exactly the same. And so I want to find when I'm helping you look for a dog, I'm not looking for a dog for myself. I'm looking for a dog for you, because the recipe that I followed may not be the exact recipe that's best for you. So when I'm answering this question today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I help people find a dog. When I help people find a dog for training as a service dog with my direction, I'm the instructions. And the recipe is the variables of the dog that we put in alongside my instructions. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So some of the ingredients that we're considering are things like purebred / well-bred. Let's just assume for the sake of this podcast that when I say purebred, I mean well-bred, meaning it has verified bloodlines, parents with very good health, the breeder did health checks, the dog's in good health, it came from a reputable breeder who did socialization properly and litter raising properly, and all the boxes are checked there. So purebred versus mutt, and by mutt, I mean it's a mixed bag. We have no idea what this thing is. We might DNA test it. I do recommend that. But we might also just carry on and see what attributes, words are hard, present themselves over time. When I say mutt, I'm not talking about designer dogs. So if you accidentally get something that's a doodle, fine. If you purposefully go out and look for a doodle, we need to talk about doodles before you make that decision. Doodles and other designer breeds like miniature Aussies and things like that weren't bred well with good intentions. They were bred to fulfill a trend, and so they're more likely, not guaranteed, but more likely to have behavioral traits or structural conformational faults or health problems that will or might get in the way of that dog being a good service dog. It's not a guarantee, like I said. There are plenty of doodles and designer dogs who are acceptable service dogs, but I strongly caution people against getting a designer dog. When I'm talking about a mutt, I'm talking about something that the shelter guessed on what it is, but the shelter honestly has no clue, and it's anybody's guess what's actually in there. Other ingredients might be whether this dog came from a shelter, a rescue, or a breeder, and whether you got it as a puppy or an older puppy, but still younger than 18 months old. And additional ingredients that go into this recipe are this dog's history, how it was raised, how it was handled, its young life experiences, its temperament, its behavior, how it does with other people, if it likes to play fetch or not, and a bunch of other evaluations that I'll do on the dog, and questions that we ask of its caregivers to try and learn more about this dog and determine if it's a good fit for you. But all of that are the ingredients. And it's kind of like you can also make a cake with baseline ingredients that you got from your local grocery store. Or you could make a cake with ingredients that you got from a really fancy baking shop. And the quality is going to be a little bit different, but it doesn't mean it's not still delicious at the end. Now, please do not eat your service dog. That's not what I'm saying. The ingredients that go into your dog don't have to be top shelf for you to have a good service dog, but it is still important that you pick ingredients that don't have faults to them. So just as you wouldn't use rotten milk in your cake recipe. We don't want to pick a dog who has obvious conformational faults like misaligned jaw, or they're missing a leg, or they were hit by a car and now they walk a little funny. Maybe a perfectly sweet pet dog, but you're not looking for a pet. You're not looking for a friend. You're looking for a working tool. And that sounds really cold, but that's my job. My job is to help you be objective when you're looking for a dog. And my job is to be objective when I'm looking for a dog for you. Everything that I find, I'm going to run past you because I'm not the one adopting this dog. You are. And so ultimately, your decision is the final say. But I'm the one who does the objective, cold-hearted, clinical evaluation of the dog so that your emotions don't get in the way of you picking the best dog for you. There are some trainers who are going to say that the best recipe for training a dog, or for the best recipe for training a service dog, is to get a well-bred puppy from a reputable breeder. But if you guys have heard this before, what you need to know about that recipe is that most breeders, even if they're sires and dams, have a reputation of putting out dogs who have gone on to be service dogs. If you have a litter of 8 puppies, the chances of the dogs going on to being really good service dogs and passing service dog training are not great. You're looking at maybe 2 or 3 out of 8 going on to being service dogs. And service dogs fail for any number of reasons. Too happy, too friendly, too much drive. They don't want to listen to people. If they like other people too much, that's a problem. If they are too shy, if they're too protective, if they develop reactivity or aggression, there are any number of things that can wash a service dog from training before you even get to the hard stuff of public access and task training. So even if you follow a perfect recipe of finding the perfect breeder and getting the perfect puppy, and you get a puppy where it's young and it's formative and you have control over things like the fear periods and early socialization, that dog can still fail. Your cake can still come out of the oven burnt to a crisp or saggy or too dense or too crummy or whatever. And so there is no perfect recipe. Now, personally, I like mutts. I have more experience with purebred horses than I do purebred dogs. So I know for myself that I really don't want to ever own a saddlebred. I know that I could handle owning a saddlebred, and I know that I could tolerate owning a saddlebred. But if I get to choose, I really don't want to own a saddlebred. Funnily enough, I do really like Arabians, and they're both pretty crazy. But crazy in different ways. I really like quarter horses. I really like thoroughbreds. But more and more, what I've written says that my disability and my sensitivity level suggests that I need to be on some type of draft horse, which my husband's not thrilled about because the draft horses that he works with all like to sit on the fences, which is irritating. But the point is, I have more experience, I have more hands-on experience with horse breeds than I do dog breeds. Most of what I know about dog breeds is based on the dog breeds that are in my clients' dogs that I'm having to help them problem solve with, and the breeds in the mixed bags that I've gotten with my own 2 mutts. And so when I'm looking at a dog for a client, if one of the questions I ask is breeds that they know they really like or that they have experience with, or breeds that they know that they definitely want to avoid and why they want to avoid that breed. And if my client has hand pain, I'm going to try and steer them away from breeds that require a lot of grooming, with the exception being if brushing a dog calms you and reduces anxiety and helps you focus or helps ground someone, then I leave a higher grooming need breed on the list. But I do research on the breed. I do research from breed clubs and look at the standard and the conformation and all of those things to help advise my client on what's best for them. And I keep that in mind if we happen to be looking at mutts. When I look for mutts in shelters, I cast a really wide net. I look at rescues and shelters and breed-specific rescues also. And I usually start out with a list of like 150 dogs. And then I narrow it down in various rounds. And I send that to my client of, here are the top 5 dogs that I think would fit what we're looking for. Here's a list of dogs between 6 months and a year. And then here are the dogs that are a year to 18 months old. And from there, my client gives me their opinions, and then I go, it's a back and forth until we whittle it down to finding the right dog. And the reason I say that I don't have a ton of hands-on experience with breeds is that unlike a lot of dog trainers who've had the opportunity in their life to go and walk as many dogs as they possibly can and volunteer at kennels and things like that, that option is never going to be available to me because of my disability. Barking, especially in a room that echoes, I pass out. And if I don't pass out, the best case scenario is I get very bad vertigo and I almost throw up. So I can't be around dogs in an echoey space that bark. It also is extremely painful for me to walk dogs with 0 leash manners. And most of the dogs in a shelter have 0 leash manners, even if the shelter staff thinks they've taught it. There are some shelters that do teach leash manners. Most simply do not have the time at no fault of their own. A lot are using no-pull harnesses, which don't actually work. And even if they have taught leash manners for the ordinary person, leash manners for the ordinary person versus leash manners for the CRPS person are very, very different. And so it's simply not safe for me to go out there and work in a kennel or volunteer at a shelter and get a ton of hands-on experience with dogs. So when I'm learning about breeds for myself, I have a few ideas about breeds that I think would be a good fit for me based on my research and talking to other teams who work with that breed. But personally, I like the idea of a mutt. I like the idea of a mixed bag of breeds that have the potential to share kind of like a cornucopia of attributes from those different breeds. Instead of being stuck in one lane, I've got the gifts and the drawbacks of a bunch of different breeds shoved into one dog. And I kind of like that. It was definitely a challenge with my first service dog. He was both very slow and very fast at the same time, which was weird and very difficult to figure out how to work with him. Once I figured him out, though, we had an awesome working relationship, but it did take a while for me to figure him out. And he did not do well with our initial training approach. So I had to tweak my training approach to fit all of what was in him. My second dog, Austin, we did a DNA test on, learned from our first adventures, and I didn't like what I found. Gonna be honest there. Austin's like 50% husky, and I really didn't want a husky for a lot of reasons. The energy and the noise and the stubborn, primarily. I can handle stubborn, but I mainly didn't want the noise and the energy. But I have it. It's great. Fixed the noise. He knows he's not allowed to make noise in the house. A few grumbles here and there and the occasional frustration bark are fine, but I can usually see when they're coming, and so I can prepare my brain for it. And the energy is obnoxious, but we have learned to manage it. His energy is different than Robbie's energy. Robbie's energy was much shorter. Robbie needed high intensity exercise for short bursts of time. And Austin's favorite walk are the walks he takes with my husband that are 4.5 miles long over mixed terrain. And he still comes back with energy. So Austin's more endurance, less high burst. Which makes it a little bit more difficult for me to fulfill his energy needs every day with a disability, but not impossible. Now, the husky does mean that there was the potential in him for enjoying draft work and pull work. We started that early. He did show potential for it, and that has been something that he's been working on for a very long time. He's also got retriever in him, which is really great because it made teaching the retrieve task and everything that's attached to it way easier than in Robbie. The shelter told us Robbie was a Labrador. And when you're looking at this title page, Robbie is the second picture, and that is not a Labrador. This dog did not have any retrieve drive in him whatsoever. We had to teach it from scratch, and he did eventually get it, but he only did it for me and no one else. Austin will happily play fetch with anybody. So the breed mixes make for a little bit more of an interesting training journey. There are some breeds who have more predictable quirks and traits and training problems that keep popping up across the board. But when you get a mutt, you have a lot of different variables in your ingredient. Personally, I like it. I like the challenge. I like the personality. I like that you get to pull little pieces from a bunch of different breeds instead of being stuck in one breed. But that may not be what's best for someone else. Additionally, you do take more of a gamble with a mutt. There's some people who believe that when you get a mutt, you have the potential for a healthier dog because you don't have that hard line. Okay, so like if you get a mixed breed dog and it only has 25% German Shepherd in it, the chances for hip dysplasia are lower. They're not gone, but they are potentially lower. There's a lot of people who believe that mutts make hardier dogs than purebreds, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't know all of the science behind it, and nobody's done a great conclusive study on this. If you get a pure breed, you do have your eyes more open. You know what health risks that breed is prone to. And so you can run all of those tests and you can be aware of it. If you get a mutt, you're wandering around in the dark, it's like, well, let's hope this works. You also have a lower chance of knowing that dog's history. And this ties into if you get a mutt and it comes from a shelter or a rescue. You don't know what the parents were. You don't know what the parent's health was. You don't know what happened in the formative stages of this dog's life that helped shape its experiences and how it handles life overall. And all of that is really important for a service dog. And so you might think, well, why should we even bother with shelters and rescues to begin with? Yes, if you go through a shelter or a rescue, you are looking for a unicorn. And you're looking for the rarest unicorn ever. It's very hard. It's very grueling. It does take months. I'm not going to lie there. It is not an enjoyable search. That's why I want to do it for you, because I've done it before. I know what I'm looking for. I can weed out the red flags a lot faster, and I know what questions to ask. And I know how to phrase the questions so that I actually get the answer I'm looking for. A lot of a lot of people in general do not actually know what ingredients go into making a good service dog. So, if you were to cold call a bunch of shelters and rescues and say, hey, would this dog be a good service dog? They probably don't actually know. They might make a guess, but they may not actually know. Here's the thing. They told us that they thought Robbie would make a good service dog because one of the special activities he did with the prison program was he would go and visit people in a mental home and act as a therapy dog. And he did a really good job with that. Robbie was a really good service dog for me. I do not think he would have been a good service dog for anybody who was not extremely dedicated to training their dog consistently. Robbie had issues with loud noises, and he was a more sensitive dog. When something really got to him, it was at times difficult to work him through it. He was resilient in some areas and not resilient enough in other areas. Because of mine and my husband's dedication to working with him and maintaining upper tier consistency and really high standards for him across the board. So at home, at families' homes, and in public when he was working and when he was off duty, he was a good service dog. But I think if he'd been with anybody else and they'd let any of those areas go lax, that he would not have made it as a good service dog. So that's goes back to the original analogy there. The human element of making the recipe is important. And so if you've never done this before, I really want you to work with a service dog trainer. I especially want you to come work with me, but I understand if you can't afford me. I do want you to work with someone, because if you've never done this before, training a service dog is not like training a pet dog. Way more goes into it than people realize. It's incredibly easy to screw up a service dog. When you're training a pet dog, you can screw it up, but you can fix it pretty easily. And then it's kind of like a patch job. It doesn't matter if you can see the patch job or you can see some cracks. You can't do patch jobs on service dogs. You need to have a complete dog. So mistakes that you make with service dogs have wider reaching impacts. So it's really, really important that the dog is trained properly from the beginning, is what I'm going at. If you go through a breeder, you have answers to questions. Now, if you go through a breeder, you need to do your due diligence and find an actual reputable breeder. Reputable breeders, 1, don't make doodles. 2, reputable breeders are going to do a lot of hands-on socialization training and litter mate training where they take the puppies away from the litter and they take the puppies away from the mom for short periods of time. They get the puppies used to being handled. They get them used to the sounds of the home. The dogs aren't just left outside all the time. A reputable breeder will not sell you litter mates. Littermate syndrome is a very real problem. It leads to a lot of behavioral issues. Please look it up if you haven't heard of it. Reputable breeders will be able to tell you about the lineage of the dog and about the health tests that have been done. They're members of local breed clubs, and they're more than happy to let you come look at their facility, and they want you to meet the parents, and they want to be very involved, and they want to answer all of your questions, and they're going to interrogate you. They're going to interview you because they want to make sure that their puppies are going to good homes. So if you find a breeder who says, let's only talk online, no, you can't come to my place, please don't get a service dog from them. That's a big red flag. Please don't do it. Also, if you get a dog from a breeder and the dogs lived outside and never came in the house, no, red flag. If you get a dog from a breeder or you're considering a breeder and they can't tell you anything about the parents, or they can tell you with certainty that the dog you're looking at is a German Shepherd and the dog, its brother, is a German Shepherd Collie cross, that means they've not been keeping the bloodline pure, and they're likely a hobby breeder and not interested in furthering this breed. Reputable breeders are interested in furthering and maintaining the breed that they have chosen. They care about health. They care about structure. They care about look. They care about appearance. They care about longevity. They care about endurance. They're able to give you references. They're able to back up what they're saying. So if you get a dog from an irresponsible breeder, it could be a service dog, but you could also run into a lot of problems. It's way better if you are going to put your money towards a breeder, find a reputable breeder to give your money to. And that's something that I offer as well, is looking for a breeder for you and doing the best of my ability based on what I know about looking for a breeder to find you a breeder who isn't deceptive. Puppy or older. Honestly, what do you want to deal with? Puppies are better in the sense that you have full control over their socialization and formative stages and early handling and shaping and all that fun stuff. But it is also incredibly difficult to train a puppy. They mouth, they're energetic, they go to the bathroom a lot, they make messes, they go through gear super fast. You're constantly pouring out money because the thing keeps growing every week, and they take a lot of energy. If you have CRPS, they are going to make your pain extremely terrible for the first year. There's no way around that. And it's very hard, I would imagine, to look at the really cute, fluffy, chubby, wobbly thing and treat it like it's a full-grown dog. So you have to keep a lot of emotion out of training puppies, and that's really hard to do. The problem with older dogs, though, is there's still a lot of work. You can jumpstart the training a little bit faster, but you missed the opportunity to be in control of those early formative periods. So the dog might have created some weird learning habits. They might have learned some things that you need to undo. And some things you can undo, like leash pulling, but other things you can't undo. Reactive to men, pass. Hard pass. Afraid of things, hard pass. It also depends on how much time you want to spend fixing stuff. So there are some dogs that you're going to have to spend a lot of time fixing something before you can move forward. And there's a lot to cover in service dog training. And so you have to weigh, do you want to start with a clean slate, puppy, Or do you want to be willing to put in 2 months, let's say 1 to 2 months of fixing something before you can get to the actual meat of training this dog? That's what you get with an older dog. But with an older dog, you have potentially less of a gamble because you can see the dog that you have. It's right there. If you get a dog that's between 6 months and 18 months old, you have an idea of that dog's conformation. It's still not a guarantee, but you have a better idea than you do with a 2-month-old puppy. You can get a feel for that dog's temperament and its drive and its interest in you and its interest in playtime. And you can see roughly what size it's going to be when it's done growing. You can guess, basically. But the problem there is that the dog is closer to being done growing, which is a great thing and a bad thing because we got Austin when he was 15 months old. And so we were able to judge his conformation and judge his size and his temperament and his personality. And we checked him off as being a go. This was great. But Austin came to us with some really fun problems. I'm pretty sure he was taught this, and I really don't appreciate it. But he was taught to hug people. So he would try and stand up on his hind legs and put his front paws on my shoulders, or box me in my chest when he didn't want to do something. Or we'd be walking along and he'd suddenly jump up, cross my path, and bounce off of my chest. And here's the thing. I weighed 160 pounds and Austin weighed 76. So he was half my weight. And when he stands up on his hind feet, he's about 5 feet tall. I'm 5'10". No, he did not push me over. The only reason he didn't push me over is because Robbie pulled a lot of similar crap when we trained him, and my body kind of reverts back into training mode, and I don't fall over unless I'm surprised. So my body learned pretty quickly to be just always on guard for whatever Austin was going to pull in the first 60 days of training him. Because he was already 76 pounds, it was very hard to give effective corrections. He just didn't care. They had taught him to hug. They'd taught him that it was okay to grab your hand while he was walking beside you. I think somebody probably trained him with treats, and so he was always looking for our hands for food. And so he was constantly nose nudging our hands, mouthing on our hands, licking our hands. Anytime our hand moved, he'd try and grab it. And it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't reactive, it wasn't a serious problem. But when you have CRPS and a butterfly landing on you feels like somebody punched you, it was a very big problem. And it was made more difficult by his size and his weight. Another really fun thing that Austin used to do is that we'd be walking along and he'd be doing great. He was moving with me. There wasn't tension in the leash. Everything was fine. And then he would see a butterfly off to the side of the path, and he would just dart off the side of the path all of a sudden and surprised me most of the time. Half the time, I was able to grab my belt and use my core to help brace the impact. But there were several times where he did catch me completely by surprise, and my arm hurt massively after he did that. And so it was just like, when you get an older dog, especially if you get a dog who's closer to that 18-month line, you have a dog who's big. So, plus side, you can see more of what that dog is going to be like. Downside is that if you need a heavy mobility dog, so like you need a dog who in stage is between is over 70 pounds. And you get an older dog, they're more likely to be closer to that 70 pounds. And you have to have the physical strength to train 70 pounds. Whereas if you start with a puppy, you can go ahead and start teaching all that gentle stuff and responsiveness before they have the size on you. So that is something to take into consideration. But puppies mouth more. So there's that. And the training techniques and the training approaches do change depending on how old the dog is. They evolve as the dog grows up. Ultimately, when I'm working with a client, when I'm helping you figure out what's best for you for training a service dog, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about yourself. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about your lifestyle, your hobbies, your activities, things you want to get back to doing. I'm going to ask you about how your disability limits you and help you figure out tasks now. Some trainers might wait until later. I want to figure out tasks now so that I can go ahead and help you pick out a dog who's most likely going to be able to help you fulfill those tasks. And then I'm going to start the search for you. If you know you want to start with a puppy and you know you want to go with a breeder, I'm not going to force the mutt issue on you. I will help you start looking for a breeder and we'll go that route. But I will probably recommend that we look at several different breeds instead of just picking one, because one narrows down our pool a lot. So as you're listening to me go through these things with you, even if you're not going to work with me as your trainer, the way I approach it is the same way that you can approach it for yourself. Make a list of what you want to do with your life, what your hobbies are now, what hobbies you want to get back to, how a dog might be able to help you do that. Things that you know you want in a dog: short hair, long hair, medium coat, good heat tolerance if you live somewhere hot, good cold tolerance if you live somewhere cold, confident. There's some temperaments that are going to be universal across all service dogs. Friendly, confident, zero aggression, zero reactivity, zero shyness, things like that. But then you're also going to look at if you need a mobility dog who helps you with doors and bracing and counterbalance, you really do need a dog who's 70 pounds or bigger and who's 24 inches at the shoulder and taller. Okay? Those are non-negotiable if you need bracing and counterbalance and opening doors and helping with chores like moving heavy objects and laundry and dishwasher and loading machines and things like that, and retrieve. You can work with a smaller dog for light mobility, but that dog's not going to be able to do brace work. They might be more limited for moving objects for you, doing retrieve. They might be able to do counterbalance, but it depends on how tall they are. There's a lot more variables at play there. If you don't like big dogs, but you need a mobility dog, I don't know what to tell you there, because mobility dogs are large dogs. That's a fact about service dogs. The dog needs to be big enough to do the tasks. And a lot of mobility tasks are not tasks that smaller dogs can handle doing safely for the health of the dog. Do you have the energy to take a puppy out every 2 hours and clean a crate 4 to 5 times a day because they had potty accidents? Do you have the patience for that? Do you really like rescue dogs? Do you really like shelter dogs? And also do your research on what's available in your area. If you don't have a lot of shelters in your area, how far are you willing to go to look for a dog? How far are you willing to go to meet with a breeder? All of those are questions that you need to be willing to ask yourself to come up with a criteria. Come up with a criteria list to help you figure out what's best for training a service dog for you. Now, to help you guys with this, I will post a list of questions that will help you come up with your list of criteria. They're not a cookie cutter list of questions. I want you to shape them to your specific lifestyle, but they'll help think of them as brainstorming tips to help you create your criteria list. Thank you for listening to this question on what's best for training a service dog. If you have any questions for me or you'd like to sign up for my dog search service and then training with me, please send me a message. Thank you.